Hey, how's it going? Champagne Sharks. We're here with Amy, and we're late, but it's my fault. I had a delivery, and they would not bring it up to my door because of COVID, so I had to go downstairs and get it. So it's not Amy's fault; it's me. But
No
how's
worries.
everybody doing out there? And how are you, Amy?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you doing? It's been a minute since we've last connected. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I can't tell how time passes anymore because of COVID. So it's like you said, it's been a minute, and I'm like, no, it hasn't. But I'm like, oh yeah, it has. It's been like March or something. It's almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. How is it over there? You guys aren't as bad as we are with the lockdown stuff, are you?
Well, unfortunately, I am in Los Angeles, which has the highest number of COVID-19 related cases and I believe deaths at this point. Every single ICU bed in LA County is at capacity. So we are experiencing a real public health crisis right now and a medical crisis. Not to mention, even though we are in California, a lot of people assume that California is a real blue liberal state. You have plenty of people who are anti-maskers who are carrying on and refusing to comply with the state and the local ordinances of mask wearing and social distancing. So
You know,
it's actually a pretty real problem right now in California and LA County in particular.
what's weird about LA that I didn't know was the anti-mask thing. Like New York is the same way in that there's a very blue city in the middle of it all, but
Mhm.
the whole state is pretty red. But I've met a lot of LA proper people who are pretty anti-mask. Like it's not just, you know,
Orange
people.
County.
Yeah, yeah. Like I found a surprisingly vocal anti-mask strain of people like who live in are from LA
Right.
talking that talk. And I found it weird how you guys have it so bad, but like in New York, there's a lot of mass shaming, a lot of travel shaming. There's a lot of big culture of comply. Everyone complies, but based on my LA friends, I didn't know how bad you guys had it based on how they were acting or pictures they
Right.
were showing of hanging out and doing all this stuff. It's a very, so I was surprised to find out it's as bad as I heard in LA.
Yeah, and a lot of people just don't want to have to make minor inconveniences to their lifestyle. They want to be able to be social and party, and there has been an issue with enforcing no parties, lockdowns, and plenty of people are not complying. You hear about how celebrities are still like throwing big soirees. Even Gavin Newsom was attending a pretty swanky party himself. So he, the enforcer of these laws, aren't even following them himself. And that's not really sending a message from a leadership point of view that he is abiding by his own rules that he's putting into place. So yeah, I do think that there's an issue with the enforcement of these local laws or state laws that's making this even worse. This pandemic and the response to this pandemic is
What are
the
your thoughts on
problem.
Gavin? What are your thoughts on Gavin Newsom?
Oh,
Because
there.
now I'm curious because I can't get a sense of him as an outsider. Like everything I know about him is social media tweets and news stories. So, like, as a resident of, you live in LA, right? Not
I
just
do.
outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
as a resident of LA, like, how do you find Gavin Newsom?
I think Gavin Newsom is just your run-of-the-mill careerist politician who has climbed the ranks and has established himself as, your neoliberal governor that is more so interested in appearances and staying in good graces with his lobbies who help keep him in his position of power. He's actually experiencing some real pushback here in California. So people are trying to get him out of office right now, and it's a really interesting thing that he's not as popular as you might think. Even though he does get a lot of media attention, he does get a lot of good feedback from other politicians. He has been, I don't know,
Yeah, but
deemed
the
one
one
of
he
the
gets
better
good
leaders.
feedback, the one he gets good feedback from, worry me. So that always gave me a bad feeling
Yeah.
about him. Like I feel like the Nancy Pelosi crowd really, really likes.
Of course, of course,
likes
but people are trying to recall him right now, and it's
Oh wow.
yeah. So
What?
they've
I'm
reached
sorry.
quite a few signatures.
What are they trying to recall him about? Any particular thing? Is it related to this COVID stuff or other stuff before that?
Interestingly enough, I believe it's the anti-maskers who are trying to get him out of
really?
office. Yeah, right.
Oh, so that's interesting.
Because some people feel that he is being too authoritarian in his decisions, that forcing everyone to wear a mask is, an infringement on one's liberties. And also, you have on the other side of this equation those who feel that Gavin Newsom has been sitting on his hand. He hasn't done enough to really enforce these regulatory procedures that would keep people safe, seeing that here in LA County, like I mentioned, we are at full capacity in ICU beds and emergency room services. So people are attacking him from either side. Some think he's doing too much, some think he's not doing enough. So it's interesting how they're kind of coming together as like the handshake meme, where people are agreeing that Gavin Newsom has got to go for very polar opposite reasons.
Don't you hate how hard it is to communicate without referring to the internet? I feel like the same way. There's no easier way to drive something home to me now than tie it into internet meme.
Yeah. Explain it in the meme. Explain the meme. Yeah, for sure.
I like what Slice said. He said, could be worse, could be Como, who is the same as Gavin, but thinks he's a Guido tough guy, which is very true. Cuomo really thinks he's a mob guy. I don't know.
I think that Cuomo really did try to capitalize on that popularity that he was receiving because,
he did a memoir. It's not even over yet. How the hell do you have a memoir?
I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, some people did take it upon themselves to try to capitalize, not only, the Jeff Bezos of the world, but also the Andrew Cuomo's, who did kind of see the opportunity to, harp on this popularity. People were turning to their governors for guidance, for feedback, for leadership, and how to respond to COVID-19. And I really think that Cuomo took that opportunity to capitalize on any advancement that would come about from that leadership position, where so many people were watching him and waiting for his response and listening to him. And, it was that whole, do you remember in the summer where people were explaining how they had a lot of women journalists were talking about how they had accumulated this weird kind of attraction for their governor because
oh my God, this is so much better. I was wondering why we were so close up on each other.
Okay, that's good. Okay. That's good. I like being kind of further back as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No offense, but I felt like we were in a crowded phone booth or something.
No, you can see all of the
Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Continue.
But yeah, that was a really strange time where women were writing about how they were experiencing this odd kind of attraction because the governor of each state was kind of the only figure that was offering any type of guidance or solutions, because Donald Trump's decision to delegate those powers to the governors to make those decisions at the state level that ultimately led to people looking to their governors to understand the severity of the issue, to understand the safety and the protocols that they were implementing in the short and the long term. And, I really do think that Cuomo kind of rode that wave as well, where people really were looking to him as this figure that obviously he had asserted himself in that position anyway, because he is of course the governor. But it really was that almost from that sense of desperation where we need answers, we need guidance, we need somebody to tell us what to do, because right now we are experiencing a public health crisis, we're experiencing an economic crisis, people were starting to be evicted, and all of that burden to make those huge decisions were placed on the governors, and some of the governors were well received in their decisions, some weren't. Whenever we're looking at Gretchen Whitmer, I mean, people literally plotted to kidnap and murder her. So I think that a lot of governors did have to deal with their fair share of criticism and scrutiny. But, Cuomo did find a way to use his celebrity-like status in that time to further his own personal career or personal endeavors that he might have after he leaves, the governor's mansion.
The Gretchen Whitmer thing, one of the weirdest things I saw with the Gretchen Whitmer thing, right, was, and this is so a perfect example of how online discourse is so weird and pedantic. Mm-hmm. Some liberal woman was like, "This is why Trump is bad. He's emboldening his followers to the point where they're going to kidnap, rape, and murder a woman in power. And then somebody who I'm guessing was a MAGA type was like, where'd you get the rape? Proof that they were going to rape her. And it's like,
Yeah.
come on, really? Like murder's not like, this is what this is the hill you're going to die on, to be pedantic about is, okay, I'll give you kidnap and murder, but prove the rape. And I was like, oh God, that was a perfect example of how much
it's like that right-wing debate lord type of tactic where they try to get you in that aha moment, thinking that somehow will give them some political points that will help even the score of the online discourse. And they really do try to take that opportunity to, at the very least, derail the conversation, where they stop the conversation dead in its track and say, I need you to cite your sources, even though right-wingers are notorious for just rambling off random information, conspiratorial narratives that have no empirical data to back up their claims whatsoever, but it doesn't stop them. The second that you try to counter them with any kind of rebuttal, they're like, wait a minute, I'm going to need you to prove what you are saying is correct.
But so a lot of people fall for it. A lot of people will start accepting the frame and trying to, give the links, and it's so stupid.
Right. Well, I do think that it is a way to derail the conversation long enough so that they can find a way to take back control of the narrative so that they can carry on with their, baseless claims. And a lot of liberals do unfortunately fall for it whenever they find themselves in a heated argument with a right-wing bad faith actor who's just trying to find a way to dunk on, the libs in any way, right?
Yep, but you know what? I forgot to let the people know who you are. Can you tell the people who don't know of you who you are and where to find you and what you're all about?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is AmyeC3, AmyeC3. I stream on Twitch. I am a leftist political commentator, I guess. We talk about housing quite frequently. I am a housing advocate. We're also getting into some online organizing. We're trying to find a way to use our platform to spread awareness, build capacity. We're also kind of leaning into some data visualization to really understand the height of the housing crisis that we are experiencing right now. So if you want to check that out, please follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/AmyeC3.
And you know what? I should put that up on the screen so people know. ISON Info says something very true. The right prey on liberals' fear of being seen as hypocritical, which is very true.
True.
Very true. Twitch.tv AmyeC3. I think I got it right. Let's see. That's it, right?
That's it.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you're like a superstar on Twitch, because when I started on Twitch very early on, you had me on, and I was like, oh, whoa, this is way different than what I have going on. But how long have you been on Twitch? You have like a big following. Like what got you on there, and were you successful off the bat, or did you just stumble onto like a whole bunch of success you didn't expect to have? Were you known before Twitch? Because I'm part of your Discord. Because after I joined, to go on your show, I have to go through your Discord. So I joined your Discord, and your Discord is insanely rabid in their fan base in the positive way, but you have a very strong following.
Well, interestingly enough, I was a victim of online identity theft and harassment from somebody from my past. And that kind of led me to do a little bit of some investigating on Twitch. And that's something that I've been really honest about up front, that I was really trying to figure out how people knew me before I had even established an online following. And I can't really get too much into the details, but I realized that I might be known without knowing the extent of how people knew me, because I was made aware, and again, I can't go into the details, that I was put online by a very vengeful ex, and that, people knew my face, but people didn't really know my story. And the way that this person painted me in a very negative way, I think, was something that I wanted to clear up on my own. So I kind of started on Twitch just to try to clear up any confusion as to what or who this person made me look like, or made me out to be. And it was really important for me to kind of establish myself as somebody who was a victim of online abuse and identity theft. And from there, I experienced success that I was not anticipating. A lot of other leftist content creators on Twitch embraced me, supported me, my mods protect me. And so everyone was incredibly supportive of me. And that was something that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I was kind of unsure or reluctant to really grasp the support base that I would have, the community that would be willing to give me a chance. And it turned out to work pretty favorably. And that's something that I wasn't expecting. And then after, a few months of streaming, I realized that people were listening to me and that I was making a difference and that I could have success on this platform that I didn't know was going to be there. And so I just kind of accepted that people wanted to hear what I had to say. And from there, I just kind of grew, and, just a really unexpected thing for me, to be quite honest. And that's kind of where I started about a year and a half ago on Twitch in August of 2019. And, here we are.
The reason why I'm smiling as you talk, I don't want people to think that you're talking about horrifying stuff and I'm horribly miscalibrated. It's because a lot of your followers are in the chat, and this happened when I was on your show too. Your followers say the funniest things on the side, so I can't I usually like to monitor the chat, but now that you're here and your followers are here, and I don't know when people are joking, like, what does this mean? What's this? I don't know. There's always these comments. This happened last time when I was on your stream, where I'm always trying to parse what's a joke and what's not. But someone said you ran over a landlord with the video game, and I have no idea what that means.
I didn't do that, but I mean, I do steamroll a few landlords and landlord apologists whenever I get a chance.
So that's a joke about the way that you basically, I guess, talk about and treat landlords in the stream and everything. Okay. So give me an example of that. Is there like a lot of legislation or stuff that happens on the books? Or for example, with COVID, I'm sure with COVID right now, there's probably a lot of landlord shenanigans.
Yeah, so we often do talk about how right now landlords are feeling a little, I guess, slighted by the fact that we did see the CDC offer a federal moratorium on evictions that did allow tenants who are unable to pay their rent shelter in place rent-free. And a lot of landlords feel that when it comes to offering these, short-term solutions that are at the very least allowing renters to not experience eviction, because public health officials did see that it would be a danger to those who would be evicted if they were, left to their own devices, if they had to scramble to a local shelter or move in with their families, that this could exacerbate the COVID-19 crisis. And the reason was to try to minimize and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 to the best of one's ability. And landlords do not care about the reason why the CDC moratorium was offered in the first place. They don't understand the connection between eviction and the spread of COVID-19. They feel as though they have been left out of this equation because there has not been any real implementation of a payment plan for tenants to make good on their outstanding rent. And landlords at this point feel as though they are the ones who are the victim of this system that is not really offering any short-term solution to renters in the form of rent relief or ongoing payments for those who are experiencing unemployment, who simply cannot pay their rent. And we do kind of try to shed light on the power dynamics of the tenant versus the landlord, where the landlord does right now feel as though they are not receiving any fair treatment from those in positions of power because there's no mortgage moratorium. There's no mortgage payment relief at this point. There's only rent relief. And it's something that I think has motivated landlords to come particularly in my stream and say, well, what about me? What about me? I have done everything that I'm supposed to as a landlord. I comply with state and federal law. I have given my tenants the opportunity to stay sheltered in place. I need help. Why don't you care about me? So it's this rebuttal that we're seeing from landlords. Well, what about me? That is something that has sparked a lot of conversation in my chat over the past couple months. And, that's really where some of that discourse has stemmed from, where landlords feel like, well, why aren't you considering my position as a landlord? Because I'm the one who is also hurting. I'm not the one who has any kind of CDC guidance right now or regulatory procedures that's allowing me to be able to pay my mortgage. And that is where we try to break down the differences between a landlord versus a tenant, where obviously, if you are a landlord, then you took it upon yourself to make an investment, and you are trying to capitalize on the short and the long term because you are building equity on that building or that home or that structure that you are paying a mortgage on, but you're not paying that mortgage out of pocket. You are extracting the wealth from your tenants to pay your mortgage and your property taxes and all of your other expenditures on top of whatever you are profiting in excess. And so you can't really come into my channel and try to get me to sympathize with you, because you are attempting to right now capitalize off of the wealth of your tenants who have worked really hard to be able to pay their rents. And
do they come into your channel? Is that something that happens? Like,
yeah, landlords come in all the time. So I have to explain to them, like, I know why you went into landlordism. The idea, because we also kind of get into like the TikTok and the YouTubes, where you have these real estate developers who are right now making content about how this is how you can get passive income. This is how you can make your investment. This is how you can capitalize in the rental housing market.
Landlord influencers.
Yeah, you do. You will see landlord influencers. Like they're out there. And sometimes we kind of meme on them as well if we come across them. But yeah, it's a really interesting discussion that we will have sometimes with a landlord who wants to come in and try to tell their side of the story. It's always about like, well, let me tell you my side of the story, because right now you're incredibly biased in the way that you are only looking at this from the perspective of the renter, right? We get a lot of those.
It's a totally random question. Why does everyone on Twitch have a gamer chair, and what do they do? Like, this is how boomerish I am with Twitch. I wasn't joking with you, but everyone has a gamer chair, and I have no idea. I feel like left out. I just have a regular, I don't know if I can show it to you, a regular bland office chair, and I feel left out.
I think even a lot of political commentators might double as gamers. I mean, I'm kind of dabbling into the gamer scene as well. I think that it comes down to what is ergonomically best for you if you're sitting in your chair for 8 or plus hours. And I don't know. I think that it kind of just comes along with the aesthetic. If you kind of have that gamer chair, then like you're kind of like establishing or solidifying that you are in fact like part of like this huge gaming platform. And even if you're not gaming and you're talking about, I don't know, something like housing, or you're a political commentator or what have you, then you might be, I don't know, you might just be fitting in a little bit more with like the rest of like the gaming.
They look comfortable. Aesthetics. Do they actually feel different? Like, I feel like they swallow you up. They look like they're I'm pretty new to my chair. I was sitting in my dining room chair for over a year, and it is pretty comfortable. It has my chair has really great lumbar support, so I really appreciate that. I don't really use my headrest that much because I kind of like slouch out. Like my body language is kind of like always like, you can always tell that I'm kind of like on edge because my body language suggests that much. But yeah, it's a comfortable chair, and I would consider it if you are looking to make an investment in a new chair. Someone said to ask, I don't know if I'm being set up or trolled, but someone said to ask you about Ace Attorney. Ace
Attorney is it's not really a game so much as it's like a storyline game. and I have been playing that. And there's multiple characters. So for every character, I try to do a voice for that character. The voice
is that the one with the meme where the guy's always pointing?
Objection, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Objection.
okay.
Yeah. So we do the Bernie Sanders voice for Ace Attorney, and that's just kind of like the joke is that I do my Bernie Sanders voice whenever I'm playing Ace Attorney, and the character Ace Attorney is always read in the Bernie Sanders voice.
Do you have a good Bernie Sanders voice? Because mine kind of sounds like Christopher Walken. Like it does.
Let's hear it. Let's hear yours, and then I'll do mine.
Oh, see, I can't do it. Hold on. I need a sentence. What does Bernie Sanders? The numbers don't support. Listen, that's not good. But that's basically. I need a sentence because at the time I was imitating something he was saying, but basically it ends up always coming out like Christopher Walken.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna find a quote of something Bernie said, and then I'll.
My favorite word that Bernie Sanders says is oligarchy.
I've never heard him say it. I know number. I know number. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of numbers out there that don't really match up to what the House says is happening out there. And then people always say it ends up coming out like Christopher Walken.
It is kind of. It's pretty good though.
Yeah. So let's hear yours.
All right. Well, now I have to think about something that Bernie Sanders says.
Huge numbers.
Donald Trump is a homophobe, a xenophobe, a religious bigot, and we are functioning as an oligarchy.
Oligarchy. I've never heard him. Do you think he plays it up, man? I think sometimes he plays it up for effect because it does go over pretty good. Like,
yeah.
I feel that way with Rosie Perez too, that she plays up. But I wanted to know something else, right? You are a Twitch streamer that actually talks a lot of substance. Because one thing I've noticed about Twitch stream, you don't really have to. Like when I got on Twitch, it suggested some people to me, and some people would just be like, "Oh my God, so kawaii," thank you guys, and just like talk about nothing all day. And the chat is like just popping, and they're getting the subscriptions. But you were talking about habitus and all this theory, and I want to know, like, what was your offline basing in?
Well, to be honest, I kind of went directly from graduating with a master's degree in community and regional planning. So I learned about habitus really from like the curriculum that, I read during my program. And I was kind of just coming fresh out of grad school to Twitch streaming. So a lot of this theory was fresh in my mind, and I wanted to be taken seriously. Like I wanted to try to establish myself as a serious political housing advocate and Twitch streamer from the jump. So a lot of my content was based on some sort of substantive information that would be considered educational, right? I really did pride myself in the beginning to be an educational content creator. I wanted to try to bring awareness to the housing plight and try to tie it into, theory and even some. I would even go into, the world of academia and read about the way that housing is tied to community planning, because it was something that I was quite familiar with. So talking about Habermas, talking about Jane Jacobs, even, and the work that she did as a well-renowned planner who wrote incredibly informative books and tried to tie that into the current political discourse while trying to educate those who are not familiar with housing or homelessness or understanding the severity of the crises in this country and all over the world, was something that I really focused on in the beginning. And I really,
if I remember right, you're a big Robert Moses fan, right?
No.
I'm pretty sure you told me you were a Robert Moses super fan.
Nope. You got that wrong. Robert Moses was one of the I think he will live on, his legacy lives on for being one of the most problematic people in the world of planning, in the way that he tried to, and he really did. What's awful is that he informed so many major planning decisions, not only in the United States, but across the world, in this vehicle-oriented development of cities, where our cities were designed around the car and not around people. And a lot of the American cities that were built during the Industrial Revolution are incredibly permanent infrastructure that has been really hard to retrofit into a new way that works for everyone in a city. So yeah, the legacy of Robert Moses lives on in the worst possible way. Seeing that he was not only pretty racist in the way that he used the automobile and designed roadways that would only allow for those who could afford a car to get to some of these public spaces or get to some of these cities' prime areas. It also was something that led to this new way of envisioning a city around a car that is incredibly environmentally hazardous. It is incredibly exclusive in who can access what. And that is something that we still see in most American cities today, that has required a lot of excess time and energy to think about things in a temporal manner. How are cities going to stand the test of time whenever we move forward into this new wave, or we have this paradigm shift where the way that our built environment is structured no longer fits with our new practices or our new ways of living? And that is incredibly pertinent to our conversation today whenever we're talking about climate change, for example, and we're trying to reduce carbon emissions. How do we do this whenever we have so many people who right now rely on a car to get from point A to point B? This also ties into the built environment that we have designed with the suburbs and city sprawl and suburban sprawl, where it's almost impossible to not rely on a car in some cities. So with this new push for multimodal public transportation that will allow for people to access, transit-oriented development, to have that ability to connect with the place that you live, is something that most modern planners are trying to put at the forefront of their conversations. But even then, it's really difficult to undo the very permanent structural damage that we are seeing right now from our car-oriented cities, right?
Yeah. And I always like to troll housing advocates by calling them Robert Moses super fans, because I feel like it always inspires a great rant. So
yeah, it kind of like, oh, I see what you did. Yeah,
you did not disappoint, because I always feel like he's such a great jumping off topic for everything bad in housing policy that we take for granted now. But someone asked this question: can you ask AmyeC3? She has read "There Goes the Hood" by Lance Freeman. It turns the notion of what long-term residents think about gentrification on its head a bit.
I have not. I'll have to take a look at that.
I also would like you to talk about the whole response to Robert Moses. I mean, you mentioned Jane Jacobs, who I believe is probably the most famous
planner like ever. Yeah,
exactly. And she did a lot to go against
Robert
Moses. Yeah, we could talk about that too.
Yeah, I think that during the time when planning became a profession, right, that was the height of Jane Jacobs' career, whenever she was trying to conceptualize the importance of building a city that works for everyone at a human scale, right? And we understand that big cities and big mega structures are so vast, and the way that we build up does not fit in with the way that we interact on a city, in a city on the ground. And she was trying to really make us understand how the way that we plan for and build cities affects us as humans, and that we have to understand that external policies that affect how we can interact and how we can engage in our own spaces are incredibly important. It's not just the design of a city, it's policies that inform the way that our cities operate. And Robert Moses understood this better than anyone else. And the way that he used this to his advantage to push for exclusive policies, especially during the time of, building after Jim Crow, where segregation was already well established. And in many respects, taking it a step back, looking at the way that racist housing policies allowed for white flights. Well, that happened because whenever the Congress sat down and they tried to establish this new housing authority, the FHA, there had to be some sort of regulatory guidance that would allow some to move to a suburb and some to not. So what the Congress did was adopt those redlining maps that were put together by the Homeowner Loan Association. And they were already marked based on that segregation that had been established from Jim Crow. And that is what set the tone to decide which areas would be marked in red, that would not be considered for a home loan, which would, and it happened to be along racial lines, where only those who were in concentrated areas that, had a large percentage of whites, renters, or homeowners in a city were offered the opportunity to move to the suburbs. And that's really what redlining meant during that time. And this was a pillar of our racist housing policies that were even promoted by our own Congress. And Robert Moses adopted the same kind of mentality where you can put together these policies and you can use the built environment to your advantage if you want to maintain this level of exclusivity in the aftermath of Jim Crow. That's what Robert Moses did whenever he adopted these transportation plans, whenever it became very similar to what we saw with redlining and home ownership. Well, if you were in a position where you could afford a car, then you could get to various parts. One of the stories that always comes to mind is it was in New York, and it was a prominent public beach that Robert Moses attempted to kind of control who could go to this public beach. Well, you had to cross a bridge to get to this public beach. So what Robert Moses did was he set the clearing of this bridge below 15 feet so that buses would not be able to get from the city to this beach, and only those who owned cars could be able to access this beach. Well, during this time, in most cases, only those who could afford a car, which happened to be, well-to-do white people, they could access this beach. Those who were relying on public transportation, which would be, non-white residents, they could not access this beach because the bus would not be able to clear that bridge that was connecting the city to the beach. That's what Robert Moses did to maintain a social order in the city of New York, to determine who could access what by using the built environment and public infrastructure to his advantage. And that gave him so much power as he wasn't even like a planner. I think that he was more so just acting in consultation with the city's planning department, but he did find a way to use his power and influence to maintain these lines of segregation in a really nefarious way. Jane Jacobs was trying to fight back against this because she understood that everybody deserves to equal access to public spaces, that the city is not owned by one certain entity, that we have to respect the public nature of our open spaces that should be owned and have access to, and where everyone has access to. And that's really where Jane Jacobs fought back against this bad practice of using the power of a city's department and infrastructure to kind of keep those out of really pertinent areas of a city that's at that point was not accessible or was not considered accessible for everyone. Jane Jacobs really did set the tone as well with understanding how we have to be democratic in the way that we allow people to make informed decisions in our own public spaces in a way that I think set the tone to understand our democratic processes today and point out the fact that even though we are residents and we have an opportunity to be part of this conversation, we can go to public forums, we can have our voices heard. It's still a very difficult process to allow for everyone to have a stake in their own community's decision-making process because of the authority that's granted to, local officials, city council, the mayor's office that do maintain the control in the city or in a community that can make it really difficult to allow for everyone's voices to be heard. And they use these tools to their advantage in many respects to keep people out of that public decision-making process. And that was just kind of the cautionary tale that she was warning people about, to underscore how Robert Moses there will be more of him in this country. There will be more people like him who will try to control our land use decisions, and that we as a people, as a collective, have to fight back and use our collective power to try to ensure that we can intervene without this authoritarian-like decision-making structure to kind of go on in perpetuity. We're going to have to, fight back against this heteronormative planning style that we saw from Robert Moses if we wanted to ensure an equitable space for everyone who should have equal access to the community's public space, resources, land use decisions, all of those things.
And I grew up in Long Island. He has a lot of things named after him in Long Island. He lived in West Islip. I didn't know that until recently. So, that explains why. But yeah, in Long Island, I grew up with so many testaments to Robert Moses. But another thing, I have no idea if this is a national liberal thing to do, or if it's just like a New York City thing. I don't know if every blue city that has a big NPR crowd, like Portland or Seattle or Brooklyn or LA or whatever, if it's just New York. But for the time I was out of school and went to people's apartments and stuff, everybody in New York, it's a big cliche, has a copy of The Power Broker. And a big joke is no one's actually made their way through it. But for some reason, everyone just has a copy of The Power Broker. It's just the New York book to have. And I've never gotten around to getting a copy of The Power Broker, but I'm still not sure if people, I don't know what his general reception is to like the average person. Like, for example, like a lot of liberals are very capitalistic and pro-business, so they all love like Steve Jobs and weirdly view him as some kind of inspirational guy, whatever. There's a lot of pro-business liberals. First off, I want to know if that's something that extends outside of New York, the love of The Power Broker. I want to know if you get a sense of what his general legacy is to the average normie, or I don't know if there is a normie take on Robert Moses in LA, because in New York, everybody has his book, just regular, NPR listening types.
I think that with Robert Moses in New York, a lot of people who feel a sense of accomplishment for finding a way to establish themselves as a New York resident takes pride in that, in a way that might keep that mindset, or the reason why New Yorkers in particular have that Robert Moses book. It's not something that I think anybody outside of New York has really embraced unless you're in the planning profession. In many ways, I've been going back to look at, some of the things that I read while I was in academia, and something that I am kind of returning back to is this study, and it's called Always Crashing in the Same City: Real Estate, Psychic Capital, and Planetary Desire. And so, that adage, if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. New York is a very unforgiving city. It is really difficult to establish yourself. You have to play the game. You have to be fierce. You have to be competitive. And the reason why you have to be a bulldog, so to speak, is because New York is the exemplar of owning real estate and accumulating capital in a city that determines your success. If you think about the way that New York is designed, the representation of the global empire that we see in New York, the way that Wall Street has been designed, the way that people do associate the success of your run-of-the-mill New York residents to the power structure of our global economy, and that New York is one of the greatest global cities that does, I think, represents not only just capitalism, but the neoliberal city that relies heavily on those power players that live, work, and socialize in New York to create this kind of merit-based structure that if you can find a way to achieve success in New York, then you have somehow established yourself. It's kind of like a game where you want to try to climb the ranks and create your own semblance of success. And I think if there is some sort of like normie fetish for Robert Moses in New York, it's because Robert Moses set the tone in trying to create this socioeconomic structure by using our built environment to determine who should live where based on one's socioeconomic status, based on one's own job. Where you work will determine where you live. And that is something that a lot of New Yorkers have probably embraced if they are trying to find that sense of achievement, or they're trying to climb those ranks to become as powerful or influential or be part of this ecosystem of merit-based business-related success that gives them that feeling that they have accomplished something based on their propensity to survive and thrive in one of the most difficult cities to live or find success, right?
Yeah, it kind of makes sense if you're someone who can celebrate, even though the book is not really pro Robert Moses, it's more objective than that, but I think they don't kind of see it that way, especially because very few of them actually read the book. I think what you're saying is true, that it's a way of signaling if I can celebrate Robert Moses New York as someone who's able to survive and thrive in it, it signals that I'm a winner, because the people who cannot live and thrive in Robert Moses New York are the losers. It also makes you wonder if there's a counter strain of people who have Jane Jacobs' book on their shelves, like more bohemian oriented thinkers. But I can't say I've seen her book on as many shelves. But this link that's on the screen here, while you were talking and I was listening to you, someone put this link in the chat, and I pulled up the link, and sure enough, I guess because of Zoom calls, and I did not read this before making that observation. This has been a decades-long trend, but I guess with the Zoom chats, in Zoom chats, everyone's curating their living rooms and their living spaces to look really good. So I guess all these politicians and reporters and journalist people and media people who want to be very serious thinkers based in New York have been having Robert Moses on their backgrounds to show. So, for example, Representative Mac Rose acknowledged intentionally placing the power broker on his bookshelf in camera view. I find that's funny that he actually admitted he intentionally placed it. So I see there's an arrow. What's interesting is the story goes through and puts all these. It says, um, and it's 46. It is 46 years old, weighs nearly 4 pounds in paperback. Thanks for sharing this, whoever shared this, and is about as ill suited for the internet age as they come. It's not even available for digital readers. I didn't know that. And yet, in certain circles, the power broker has become a breakout star of the COVID-19 era. In TV interview after TV interview with journalists and politicians working from their homes in New York City and beyond, the power broker, Mr. Caro's magisterial 1974 biography is often conspicuously visible in the background, the ultimate signifier of New York political sophistication. And Representative Max Rose is a first-term Democrat who represents Staten Island and parts of southern Brooklyn, and he acknowledged intentionally placing the book stage right of his head. But it shows person after person. And you see like the red arrow.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Lemire, the White House reporter for Associated Press, made sure it was showing on the stand. You have Jake Sherman, political senior writer, and here's the arrow. Power broker is right there. Yeah, I'm telling you, this book, every New Yorker has this book. Here we go. Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post. Of course, he has it showing. He totally would. I'm going to read this article later. I actually did not know this, that they did a story about it, because I would love someone to break this down. Well, he has a demonic stack. Look at his stack. He has like little blocks in the middle of the stack, so it's like a Jenga. Who stacks their books like this? This guy, Scott Stringer, New York comptroller, he's definitely a sociopath. Are you saying this is not something that happens in LA? It's only a New York thing?
I think so. I mean, I haven't really spent a lot of time listening to LA-based pundits. I think they're all the same. But if there is a
here you don't have to be a pundit. You just have to fancy yourself an intellectual. Like if you own an NPR tote bag, you have Robert Caro on your shelf, basically. If you have wine glasses, you probably have this on your shelf. I'm sorry I cut you off. Please continue.
No worries. The reason why I'm tying this together with this one article that I'm kind of rereading is because it really breaks down. It says right here. I'm just going to read like a quick sentence from it. Real estate is also the condition of possibility for cultural diversification and spatial intensification of the credit system's reach, facilitating an emergence of new human forms of capitalism and, through new technology, financial deepening at the psychic level. Resisting capital's attempt to make inner experience a field of real estate manifests a new front line of planetary praxis, necessitating an urgent need to revive the spatio-political unconsciousness. So basically, what we're dealing with right now is the psychic attack on the way that major cities have been built to establish, this sense of not only merit-based hierarchies determining who has what in the form of power, whether it be economic power, whether it be political or social power. And that's the way that our cities were built, to determine who's who, determine the haves and the have-nots. And I really do think that's the reason why many New Yorkers embrace this idea of Robert Moses, because he really did find a way to build or help inform our city's policies, specifically in New York, that would establish the haves and the have-nots. So yeah, I think that might be the reason why people will embrace that book, because they are trying to be the haves in this have or have not world. They're trying to establish that they have legitimacy. And
because they don't read it, they actually don't even care what it actually says about the horrible things he did.
Yeah. Well, honestly, if we're talking about liberals, then that it might be lost on them to really understand the deep impact that Robert Moses had, right? Robert Moses really did try to establish what this would describe as this credit system, where you are determining your worth as a person based on the wealth that you accumulate, based on the real estate or the ownership of property that you have in a specific city. And you have those power brokers that would lean into this idea of, depending on where you live, depending on where you work, that determines your value as a person. Your socioeconomic status is tied to your worth, and you are establishing it is a status symbol in and of itself. If you live in a prime time location, if you drive really nice cars, we are also very materialistic. So kind of using the city as an embellishment to determine who you are as a person, what is your wealth, what is your value, what is your social standing. You can really determine that in New York, right? Because of the way that it was designed to kind of indicates who you are based on where can you afford to live, based on where do you work. And I would say that is the reason why so many people do really kind of lean into this idea of what Robert Moses, even though they're not reading it, that's what Robert Moses was trying to achieve, right? In many respects.
And I think to a certain degree, they recognize what he stood for, as far as like you said, being for beneficial to the wealthy. So they don't even really need to know the details of what he did. They just need to know that he made the world more palatable to them. You know? Yeah. So that's like enough. It's kind of like when people worship Steve Jobs and you talk about all the horrible things that, he did as a person. And
but he's a visionary.
Yeah. And he's the reason why they have an iPhone. Yeah. I like my iPhone, so I like Steve Jobs. And I say that as someone who uses Apple products, but I just don't try to have a delusion. Like, I always find it weird that I always feel like there's a free-floating horniness out there, especially in the discourse and online, and a free-floating stan energy where people are just kind of just have like people have generalized anxiety, they don't know why. I think people have generalized like horniness and generalized stanness, and they just need random things to be horny for or stan. So you get like a show that just comes out for like 2 hours, and there's like already a stan Twitter for it. I'm like, there's no way you could be this passionate about this show that came out in Netflix like 4 hours ago, to the point that you're have all these gifts and all these arguments and shipping. And I feel the same thing with horniness, where I think that's where the homosexual comes from. Like, these people, if it wasn't Andrew Cuomo, they'd be horny for something else today. And Cuomo just came within their orbit, and then the gravity of they're just free-floating horniness just sucked Cuomo into their horny orbit for that day. And I feel like people are like horny for concepts even, or just horny for wealth and power and affluence. And I feel like that's how all these things get sucked into this orbit of worship, whether it's the cult of Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. Like, Elon Musk stands are just weird as hell.
Yeah.
And I just think it almost doesn't really matter the person, just if these people just want to be horny for something powerful and neoliberal. And
here's my theory on this.
Please do, because I can't figure it out.
So if we think about the beginning of our economy and how politicians or local officials had to incentivize workers to be as productive as possible, they employed the Protestant work ethic, and they tied it to religion to ensure that workers were maintaining maximum productivity in exchange for like getting into heaven once they kind of died, right? That was kind of the trade-off. And that was the incentive to work as hard as possible for your capitalist overlord, right? In order to achieve a certain baseline level of productivity, or maximize productivity even. So now that we have kind of shifted away from religious affiliation in this country, we have this new fetishization of wealth, of status, and I think it's tied to this idea of the American dream that was kind of pushed by our politicians. you know, in the wake of the Great Depression or even shortly before then, that if you were working hard to better yourself and your family, then there would be maximum output and profiting and achievement on your end. That I think was coupled with marketing and advertising to give us all of the shiny products that we could afford. And we're talking, I think it wasn't you, but it was the Comrade Kinney. We were talking about how the Sears catalogs that were kind of really prominent in the 1950s, where you could like look and see what kind of modular home you could own if you wanted to. And this was something that also drove one to, you know, work and achieve the American dream for themselves. And I really think it has much to do with this idea of fetishization because of advertising and commercializing, you know, these material goods that you could have. And now with the internet, we have this new wave of idolization. So it's like this is what I think is the conglomerate of fetishization and idolization. Now that we have this ability to connect with celebrities, we have this ability to really feel like we are part of this broader conversation. The new incentive, of course, isn't the same as it was with the American dream. It's just the way that it has evolved that has kept us kind of like in this state of, I don't know, submissiveness, where we constantly have someone or something, and that ties in with the Cuomo sexual stuff, where we constantly have somebody who is telling us or incentivizing us with like the carrot and the stick to inform our decisions or to push us to do what we have to do in order to achieve our own semblance of material wealth or socioeconomic status. And now that we have all of this online shit that we are now kind of using to broaden ourselves on an individual level. Like you have influencers, you have brand ambassadors. There's a new way to achieve this semblance of success or status. The incentive's a little different because now you don't only have the opportunity to enrich yourself, you can become a celebrity, you can become popular on the internet. So it's like, who's really pulling the strings on that
and
end?
I feel like it's not even a celebrity, it's to become an influencer, which is kind of a degraded form of celebrity. What's interesting is the reason why I say you can't really just call it celebrity is because even celebrities to me are trying to become this thing themselves. So people, I think, are almost meeting in the middle at this level. And what I mean by that is there's a really good interview, I've mentioned it before, of Will Smith with Trevor Noah, and Trevor Noah asked him, "It used to be inaccessible. We used to not see you until it was time to do a movie. Now you're on TikTok, and now you're on Instagram. You have a YouTube channel. You're doing all this stuff." And Will Smith was basically saying that old model of celebrity is kind of gone. You kind of have to be accessible and omnipresent. So yeah, I think it's not just that these people are aspiring to celebrity, like you said, but I think it's actually this weird perversion of celebrity that even old school celebrities have been forced. It's a game that even old school celebrities have been forced to play. And I feel like celebrity is almost too broad a word. It's a very weird distillation of the attention economy into this. It's kind of like if they talk about the coca leaf and what the coca leaf was to like Bolivian people, and then they talk about how the West End scientists found a way to take the most powerful part of this thing that people would just chew in the beginning of the day to get energy to work, and distill it to this toxic thing called cocaine that, you know, is going to ruin. Like, people weren't overdosing on chewing coca leaf, but cocaine is such a distillation of the most toxic part of the plant. I feel like Instagram is the cocaine powder version of maybe celebrities' coca leaf. It's
Yeah.
so it's not Instagram, influencer.
Plenty of Instagram influencers.
Yeah. I said Instagram and I meant influencer, but I feel like influencer is the powder cocaine version of what celebrity used to be. It's something worse.
Well, my point is that I feel like we have this propensity to subvert ourselves because we need somebody to tell us what to do. We've been
Yeah.
relying on people telling us on what to do for
Mhm.
quite some time. That's the reason why I think influencers are so successful, because plenty of people look to influencers, much to the same way that they look to their bosses to tell them which products are the best. How should I dress? What's the best thing to do for my skin? All of these things I think come down to the fact that a lot of people do like to have guidance and to have somebody inform their own decision making. And I think that's ever present in the world today, where, yes, you do have your fair share of fetishization toward, brand recognition and what you call it. And I love that, the attention economy, where, you have a split between those who are looking to have guidance, those who are looking to be followers, looking to, get their information, get their guidance from somebody else, but then also those who take it upon themselves to act as the influencers, act as the person who will give you
Almost
the information that you need.
almost in a predatory way. Like they see that need and
Mhm.
they see an opportunity to jump in there and exploit like this
Yeah.
need that people had. I was struggling with whether or not to interrupt you at a certain point because you were struggling for a way to describe this kind of need that these people have for
Yeah.
someone to tell them what to do. And the reason why I was struggling about whether or not to interrupt, because you were on a nice flow and I didn't want to mess it up. But the last guest that we had, actually, I was having the same struggle with him. And he crystallized it for me by feeding me the term where he said learned helplessness. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I'm trying to describe. It is learned helplessness. Like, I don't know if you've read or heard the learned helplessness experiments and stuff, but
Mm-mm.
well, the learned helplessness, this guy, Martin Seligman, I knew of a learned helplessness before. I just never thought to apply it to what you and I are trying to describe. But basically, what would happen is, what's the best way to put it? Okay, so they would put a dog into, it was a kind of a cruel experiment, but they would put a dog into this thing where um, no matter what the dog did, it couldn't learn. It couldn't learn. It couldn't get out of its trap. I think it was an electroshock trap. Let me get it right. I don't want to butcher it. I'm on Al Gore's internet, so I might as well Google it and get it right. There's no need to. Um, there's no need to just try to guess. But okay, so this is what happened. American psychologist Martin Seligman initiated research on learned helplessness in '67 as an extension of his interest in depression. And what it was in part one of the study, 3 groups of dogs were placed in harnesses. Group one dogs were simply put in a harness for a period of time and then later released. Groups 2 and 3 consisted of yoked pairs. Dogs in group 2 were given electric shocks at random times, which the dog could end by pressing a lever. Each dog in group 3 was paired with a group 2 dog. Whenever a group 2 dog got a shock, its paired dog in group 3 got a shock of the same intensity and duration, but its lever didn't stop the shock. To a dog in group 3, it seemed that the shock ended at random, but it was actually ending because the dog in group 2 that it was paired with was actually the one causing it to stop. So for the group 3 dog, the shock was inescapable.
Right.
Now what started happening is in part 2 of the experiment, the same 3 groups of dogs were tested in a shuttle box apparatus where all the dogs could escape shocks on one side of the box by jumping over a very low partition to the other non-electrified side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can show you a picture of this thing, and how it looks like is this. So you see that little thing on the right where It's a two-sided box and a
Mhm.
little. So the dog just has to jump over that little hurdle to go from the shock side to the non-shock side. So they put all three dogs in there, and they found that the dogs in the first part of the experiment, who were not allowed to stop their own shocking, and that the shocking seemed to end randomly due to nothing that they did, they wouldn't jump from one side of the box to the other. They would just lay down and just take the shocks.
Aw.
Even though all they had to do was just jump over an easily jumpable hurdle, and so all of the dogs could escape shocks on one side of the box by jumping over a low partition to the other side. The dogs in groups 1 and 2 quickly learned this task and escaped the shock, but most of the group 3 dogs, who had previously learned that nothing they did had any effect on the shocks, simply laid down passively and whined when shocks. So they call that learned helplessness, where you just
Mhm.
give up on believing you can change anything due to like messaging you got earlier in life. And they
Yeah.
tie it to depression, and they tie it to like abuse. Like, if you grew up in an abusive household and there's nothing you can do to stop it, you pretty much take a lot of people's crap as an adult later in life and don't. But there's like a whole bunch of ways people can internalize learned helplessness. And when I was trying to describe to this guest what you just described about people's kind of searching for things in people, he tied it into learned helplessness. He said, "Yeah, it's kind of a learned helplessness." And I'm like, "Oh my God, he's right." Like, these people, at some point in their life, got the message, politically or whatever, that nothing I do is gonna make a difference. So I'm just gonna lay down and take it and defer to someone else to stop the shocks for me, to control my life.
This definitely could be a systemic. This could be very similar to the systemic conditioning that we have seen in our worker versus employer relationship, where as workers, we just accept that there's very little that we can do, even though we do have tools to our advantage. We can unionize, we can organize in our workplace, but we tend to respond more so to the coercive nature or the threats of job loss that we might receive from our boss that might keep us in this place of submission, right? And that is a learned response through conditioning over the course of our lives, where it is systemic. That same feeling of helplessness that we feel as a worker right now could be the same feeling of helplessness that our parents felt, right? And so on. That is evidencing that it is more so the oppressive nature of our capitalist system that leaves plenty of workers who maybe have felt conditioned into accepting that they do not have much power or control over the rest of their lives, because they have been a part of the workforce, a cog in this machine for so long. There might be some sort of effects to our own psyches because of the way that we have been forced to participate in our economy in order to survive, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, we were talking about this, and we kind of this is actually how we got on it, right? We were talking about, it was the guest was Isaac Murdoch, and he has a podcast called Night Rule. And when he said the learned helplessness thing, so many things kind of clicked, because we were kind of talking about a lot of things, but we were talking about people who are obsessed with the idea of voting as the ultimate thing you can do in a society, and
Right. Yeah.
like voting is an example of that. Like, forget about mobilizing, forget about organizing, forget about real activism. I'm just going to show up once every 2 years and vote for the other dog that's going to stop the shocks. I'm just going to lay down and just take them, and I can't really control anything. But we started thinking about that. The way our conversation started is that we were saying, is liberalism really an absence of belief, or is it really an absence of context? Or is there, like, it's easy to just kind of think of liberals or centrists in general, whether you're centrist right or centrist left or like moderates, as just being an absence. Like, an absence of context, an absence of positive values. Um, like a vacuum of values and context. And we were kind of arguing, not arguing, but debating about, can anything really lack a context or lack, like, there's a positive value there, but we're not seeing it. Like, just because they're not far left or far right, doesn't mean they believe in nothing. And that's why I like terms like radical liberal is the term people use now, like rad lib or radical centrist, because I think it's true. They could be as radical as anyone else in their moderation. And we're trying to fish for, if there's a positive value for what a liberal or centrist is, instead of just thinking of them as not right or not left, what would it be? And what I was saying was, I think the best way to put what a liberal believes is, better things aren't possible. Like, even in their wildest fantasies, when they fantasize online is of compromise. Like they imagine, like, if you watch West Wing, the biggest victories aren't destroying Republicans. It's, we were able to work with them on something. Like, even in the wildest dreams, they can never think of winning. And that's when he said, learn helplessness. That's like learn helplessness. And I realized that's what their belief is. That's what centrists, moderates, liberals, their positive value is. They believe in learn helplessness. It's just a matter of just hope things don't get worse. Like, lay down, take it. Better things aren't possible. Just hope that worse doesn't come. And I feel like that really ties into what you were saying when you were saying that people are looking for someone to lead them, or looking for someone to delegate their agency to.
I think that with centrists and moderates, they are evidencing a form of privilege where they obviously might not be as politically aware. Maybe they are not really interested in politics. And then I think that is in and of itself a form of privilege as well, when you are not affected by political decisions that are made and you have the ability to remain apolitical or absolve yourself from any online discourse because you are not impacted in any way, right? I think that whenever you see those veer off to either the left or the right, it becomes more about your shared values that you might hold as a collective, or you might have an ideology that aligns with leftist values versus right values, and it becomes personal, where you want to see policies or you want to see representatives who reflect your own internal principles and your values. And that's where you start to see that divide, right? Where if you are a liberal, then you are also probably benefiting from a system and you might see the value in upholding the status quo, but you might also see that it is not the best, it's in bad form to maybe not be in the business of upholding some liberal policies that lead to incrementalism, right? So you have the foresight to understand that it's important to leave open a little bit of room for social progress, right? And that's the extent that you are willing to go. Whenever you start to veer off to the right, you understand the value of traditional norms and traditional values, or your evangelical ideology that you want to maintain, that you want to help structure our social fabric of the world, right? And you start to really lean into your ideological perspectives whenever you go to either side of the political spectrum. I think that is really what sets apart liberals from conservatives. And anything further than that, I think it does come down to policies or politics that either affect you personally, or you have the capacity to see how it hurts other marginalized groups if you're on the left, or other disenfranchised groups on the left. When it comes to the right, if you are in support of accelerationist or extreme right-wing policies, it's because you see the value in the way that this current system benefits you, and you want to uphold the traditional norms and values that are in place that you and your family will continue to benefit from. So it's a much more nefarious, I think, mindset if you are on the right and you see the benefit of keeping things the way that they are, and you don't really care about how those who are marginalized or in incredibly vulnerable states that will continue to see the effect of these policies go on in perpetuity. If you don't have the capacity to even understand how the system is inherently dangerous and inequitable, but you see the benefit of supporting it, then I do think that sets you apart on a moral and an ethical level whenever we're trying to like break down or make sense of how people can veer off in either direction.
Here's a question I have for you, right? Because I totally believe what you say is true about the liberalism of being privileged, where I don't have to care. I have no dog in the fight. I have no skin in the game. But what I want to ask you about, because I think this is the kind of person that I think ties into more of what I said with the learned helplessness thing, right? What do you think about the kind of person? Because this is the other thing, and I find this a lot, and it's very frustrating but confusing to me. I get why a Jill Filipovic or whatever believes in better things aren't possible, because she doesn't need better things to be possible. She's got her, she's flying all over the world like an Instagram influencer on yachts and, in 5-star hotels in third world countries, locals serving her. She doesn't need a more enlightened liberalism. But what I'm interested in is the poor or blue collar or lower middle class or technically high earning but more precarious than they want to admit middle class liberal who feels the same way. And some of them maybe are more deluded about how privileged they are. So they're like, hey, I get to live in a nice brownstone in Brooklyn. I'm drowning in student debt and a whole bunch of debt where if I don't make money for 3 months, I'm going to lose everything, or maybe I'm paycheck to paycheck, but I have the trappings. I can go to yoga every week. I can have, coffee. There's that, down to a blue collar person who could desperately use a union or desperately use whatever. I do think that type of liberal that you describe definitely exists, is definitely a thought leader. It definitely has outsized influence, but there are a lot of moderates and radical centrists and radical liberals who, I mean, it's like the left of center version of what's the matter with Kansas. When people always ask, what's the matter with Kansas? Why are these blue collar coal workers and miners and all these people siding with heinous anti-poor Republicans? I feel like liberals have their own version of that. Like people arguing against student loan forgiveness, but they have student loans. They're like, no, it's okay. I'm just gonna pay them because I took them out. It's the right thing to do. I want to know what you think is going on there, because to me, like, that's the one that really makes me think about that learned helplessness.
I think that those particular brands of liberals, they are what you're describing in the like the Aaron Sorkin loving, like West Wing watching liberals who do think that it is important to uphold the status quo of our politics that require bipartisanship in our diversity of thought or opinion, because they think that it's better to be a loyal member of the Democratic Party. I think it's very much tied to political affiliation, right? Where they have established themselves as a very loyal member of the Democratic Party. Maybe they're even a loyal voting bloc for the Democratic Party. They'll vote blue no matter who. And some of them might have various factions in this, very large voting bloc of Democratic voters where they might be a little bit more feminist. They might have some sort of additional affiliation to an organization or a movement, but doesn't move so far outside of the confines of electoral politics that they would consider themselves a leftist. They do benefit from the status quo because they cannot envision another way, right? They have not been swayed enough by their own lack of material conditions to see the benefit of fighting for leftist causes, because as you mentioned, they are living in that brownstone. They have achieved some sort of financial success, even if they are paying off their student debt and they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars of it and they've incurred that much debt. They still see the need to be a pillar of the establishment's voters of the Democratic Party that tend to believe that it is, and it's almost like it's almost that same idea of becoming subverted to the idea of neoliberalism, that neoliberal austerity is the only way to maintain a successful order in society that's informed by our neoliberal politics, based on bipartisanship, based on reaching across the aisle, based on finding some sort of common ground solution with the political enemy, because they might not even see Republicans as the political enemy. They are so inundated with indoctrination that they can't even envision any way forward that would be working outside of those confines of electoral politics. They are just your run-of-the-mill Democratic voters who have ascribed to the ideas of neoliberalism because that's the way that it's been portrayed in the media, on the news, and they almost might feel like they are deviating away from the norm, and that would make them bad Democrats if they would move further left, because of how it's the leftist values, leftist organizing, leftist mobilizing, that is deemed as ineffective, or you are demonized by the media, by mainstream media pundits, by representatives in political office. If you are too far left, then you are a nuisance to the Democratic establishment, and you will be perceived as much. And I think that whenever you have found yourself in that very specific position where you want to be loyal to the Democratic Party, you might feel like you are doing a disservice to the Democratic Party's project by going outside of, this very large tent or bubble that does keep things as is, right?
What do you think they think the Democratic Party's project is that they're protecting? Because that's always been my struggle.
I think that those who benefit from a neoliberal order, who have their own semblance of success, who are satisfied with their own material conditions, who have achieved some sort of wealth or social standing that makes them comfortable, they feel as though that is the Democratic Party's project working as intended. This might be viewed as a success, which is the reason why you have so many members of the Democratic Party falling in line with this overall project that doesn't offer any real long-term substantive change. It is just meant to uphold the status quo. And if you are benefiting from the status quo, why would you deviate away from it, right? I think is the mindset of so many of these Democratic voters.
One thing they do to because I don't think it's easy for them to admit to themselves on any level, hey, I think the project is to be neoliberal and to preserve my wealth and everything, even though I think that is the real reason. I think there's a degree to which they can't admit it to themselves. So they have these nice decoy projects of, diversity, of feminism, but it's all of a form that is for a particular class of people, because like you said, the real project is really protecting the class. So their idea, I notice every project that starts from the ground, by the time it filters through these people, becomes
bastardized. It's
yeah. So gay rights becomes about, and not saying that gay marriage is wrong, of course, but it was never the full spectrum of what gay people were fighting for, but they've managed to turn it into the spearhead, you get to be on a wedding registry and have the same fancy, weddings that your straight bourgeois friends, have. Or for Black people, the first time around, Black Lives Matter started and the protests mattered. And then I always imagine this finish line and breaking the tape. And you know, by the time you end the race, the tape you're breaking is some really stupid neoliberal thing. So by the end of the race, it was Oscar so white, and people were saying, and people would seriously tell me, and this was a serious response I used to get online from blue checks, where I was like, people would be like, "You should be thankful to the Black Lives Matter movement," and I'm like, "Okay, what did it accomplish?" And this is the first time around. They said, and the example that we keep giving is Oscar so white. I'm like, that is the most ridiculous thing. How do you not notice that's a ridiculous answer? How do you start with Mike Brown and Tamir Rice and all that stuff, and you end with Oscar so, like, with rich people getting Oscars and getting a chance to act in more movies, you know, like how do you go from Trayvon Martin to that? And then this time around, someone made a joke that Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd died, and what we got for this round of protests was Black 90s sitcoms on Netflix. Like, there's a couple of rows on every streaming channel now where, you know, they've brought back, they go to Amazon, there's 2 or 3 black rows of programming that you can get now. And I just feel like
if anything, this is, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say they basically just they have the project that you described, but they lie to themselves and to others by having these fake progressive diversity feminist things that at the end of the day are still the project that you described.
I think that we're seeing like this we're seeing how these different concepts that we have been talking about can tie together, right? Where this need to have some sort of recognition, whether it be this this personal subversion to something bigger than us, and we feel like we are receiving our fair share of recognition or representation whenever these big brands or when Hollywood sheds a little light on these issues that could be seen as mere exploitation or to further their own brand if they are looking to, I don't know, capitalize off of the Black Lives Matter movement and call to action, you know, a one-day event that ultimately will bring in more ad revenue for, you know, like an Instagram model or like a company who was taking this opportunity to kind of get in on this brand related movements that is not necessarily leading to major structural change on the ground. It just means that it has reached this level of popularity. It's a trend that big corporations or Hollywood will capitalize off of, which is the way that I think it's bastardized whenever there's no true reform that we're pushing forward or toward. It's just that it's become a mainstream media issue and that people are talking about it at all levels. But I think that we can tie it back to this need to feel like we are receiving some form of recognition or representation that is not necessarily driving for a real progressive project on the ground. It just means that, oh, some people are so shameless that they will capitalize off of these incredibly sad, these incredibly heartbreaking stories that have led to, you know, more media attention that is calling upon this movement that we're seeing to address the systemic issues and police brutality and the racism tied to it. And instead of finding a way forward to actually organize on the ground, people are just capitalizing on from it on the internet. And the whole Oscar so white thing, I think, is the exemplar of the way that these movements do reach mainstream recognition, and that you might feel as though this is an accomplishment if you have people who are in high places or positions of high status kind of shedding a light on it. Are they doing it because they are trying to be a part of this revolution, this new way forward? Or is it because it's trending, it's popular, you want to seem like you're on the right side of history, so you are going to talk about it to either further or preserve your brand? And it's for all of the wrong reasons that we've seen some of these movements turn mainstream. That really kind of sheds a light on how influence or social media influence or Hollywood do have this way of perverting the original intent of these movements whenever they take the opportunity to either capitalize off of these movements in some way by showing that they are on the right side without necessarily having the tools or the resources that are necessary to be a true part of this movement on the ground, right? I think that's...
I agree.
uh,
Something I was just thinking about, right, is I feel like you and I clearly read a lot, because whenever I talk to you, you always talk about, like, studies you're reading and books that you've read, or just things that evidence you've done a lot of deep reading. And anyone who's followed my podcast, or has heard me stream, knows that I read a lot of books. And I find it interesting that none of us have books in the background of really, like conspicuous.
Yeah.
Like, I think, and the reason I bring that up in response to what you said is I think a lot of liberalism, or just moderation in general, because I don't want to just call it liberalism, because I feel like the Fox News right-wing centrists have more in common with the MSNBC and CNN centrists probably than they do with the rough and tumble right-winger, out in the blue collar sphere. And same thing with the moderate liberal. They probably have more in common with the right-wing pundit who's also in cable news, and they have with the union guy in Detroit or something, right? But I feel like so much of that centrist mindset, whether from the right or left, is about signaling that I care about Black people, signaling I care about, like, the populism is signaling of that right winger, the feminism is signaling. And so even, like, their book choices or their whatever, everything is meant to be a totem for a deeper value, but the deeper value doesn't have to actually be there, which is why Obama, his legacy to this day, he's still doing Spotify playlists every season. Like why? Like, who cares what music you listen to? Like, or talking about his top books for 2020. And it's like, what does any of this actually mean? Like, who are you besides what you consume? This idea that what you consume, no, what you signal is more important than what you are. And the best signal is always what you consume. It's just
what's interesting about the Obamas and the way that they have really used their political power and their influence in a way that really it does represent the greater issues, right? I think that with liberalism in general, this idea that if you see somebody who looks like you, then that is the representation that you need, and that it should be enough to live vicariously through somebody, even if that person has done nothing to address your own material needs, your own socioeconomic status, your own propensity to experience forms of racial or social injustice. And that is what has led to so many people feeling this sense of civil unrest in the wake of the Obama administration, because Obama did not do enough during his tenure as the president to address these material needs and these grievances that are felt by so many people, even though he did campaign as if he was going to be this organizer who was going to lead to massive structural change. And I do think that the liberal mentality that is tied, or neoliberal mentality rather, that's tied to the Obama administration was that you should feel this sense of placation, because if you are a non-white individual who has been suffering or who has been at the disadvantage of neoliberal austerity that's rooted to racial injustice and various forms of oppression through systems of oppression that have led you to find it very difficult to find any semblance of success, then you should at least feel some sort of extended success by proxy, because Barack Obama represents you in becoming the first half Black president, and that should be enough to pacify you, and that should be your motivation to feel like you can overcome any obstacle or any disadvantage. And that is I think that's the cornerstone of neoliberalism, where a system that does not do anything for you is not going to change. You have to change yourself by adjusting to or making some sort of great strides or overcoming these obstacles that stand in your way in order to achieve whatever level of success you are looking for, right? That is precisely what Barack Obama did whenever he was in his office, where I think that he thought that if he could set the tone or set an example, that he found a way to succeed and all of the obstacles that he had overcome in order to make it to the highest office in the land, then you should use that to your advantage or your motivation. It's like Barack Obama was a great motivational speaker for those who he promised to help but ended up not helping, and that he thought this would be sufficient to drive more, maybe more influence or motivation to push oneself to greater levels of achievement simply by virtue of seeing him in office and his success as the president. That I think is a remnant of most mindsets, where we're not going to, most mindsets of politicians that uphold the neoliberal austerity or maintain the status quo, where representation in high places should be enough to push you to achieve any success and overcome any barrier that stands in your way. And that's not the case. We can't continue to allow this mass manipulation or this conditioning to kind of inform us or make us feel like we are in this position, we are experiencing this precarity because we haven't worked hard enough or we made a wrong decision. And I think that so many people are inundated with this feeling of shame or doubt because we think that we have done something wrong, because we have fallen victim to an oppressive political and economic system. And we don't have somebody who is championing us in a way, except for, some who are trying to do so in Congress, like the Squad, to really set the tone or pave a way for people to succeed through massive political change or populist policies that would at least give us a better opportunity to find some level of self-sustainability that doesn't, completely keep us in this place of victimization or in this sense of oppression, right?
Yeah, very interesting too that you called Obama half white, because I feel like that's like a designation that you're not allowed to say. And I was wondering, how did you get into the habit of calling him half white?
Did I call him half white or half Black?
Did you call him half white or half Black? I mean, either way, I think either one is something that people aren't allowed to say. So my question
I think I said half Black because I think I was kind of like quoted.
You probably did say half Black. I might be misremembering, but I mean, I think either one is interesting. So let's go. Oh,
whenever I call him our first Black president, people say like half Black. Like people would make sure that I was correct in that.
Also, you were corrected into calling him half Black.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Multiple
interesting.
Times. Yeah.
Who was corrected? Who was correcting you? Was it like Black people correcting you?
No, it was like weirdly enough, it's like white people, like politically correct, like white people who I don't know.
Interesting. I think a lot of politically correct white people were like doing the opposite, like where like conservatives would point out, oh, he's half white, and then politically correct liberals would be like, oh no, he's a Black man. And I think it's a relevant thing to bring up, but I noticed a lot of white people on the left would be, but you know what, at the time I was talking to liberals, so I don't know if it's a different thing, but at least white liberals would be very wary about calling him half white, that they were, I guess, whitewashing him. But I feel like it is a very relevant aspect to his identity, that the fact that nobody would bring it up, I think, allowed him to exaggerate his commitment to Black causes, which so I just found an interesting thing. But now I'm extra interested in the fact that it was white people that would correct you. I find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, and you know what, it was more in college that I would hear that in the beginning of his presidency, where I don't know if it was more so like white people try to be like, well, actually, he's not 100% black, so you should be specific about, the fact that he's not, because it's not technically correct. I don't know. It was just like I think it was like a weird thing. I went to college in West Virginia too, which is even more strange that, some people are like, well, actually, I don't know if that has anything to do with it either. But I hope that I got the point across. I didn't like.
Oh no, you totally got the point across. Your point was wonderfully put. That's why I didn't really add anything to it. I just noticed that part was interesting. No, but your point was wonderfully put. It was very well put. If you don't mind, can you tell us some more about yourself and your real life organizing and everything? Because one thing that I find interesting about you, and this is something you can share some thoughts on too, right? Is I'm more interested about the people who just kind of create content or stream or podcast, but it's just like pure punditry versus the people who do activism. And there is this kind of idea of a divide, like that either you're like, not really doing activism, you're just doing entertainment, podcasting, streaming, and that gets lobbed at a lot of this online political media, or you're 100% activist and you disdain that stuff. And I always feel like there needs to be some kind of middle ground. I even think DSA should cultivate like a media arm, like a media messaging arm and things like that. So one thing I find interesting is that you're one of the people who I think actually does straddle that line between being known, for streaming and all this stuff, but you do actual like organizing and mobilizing and doing things with DSA. And I was wondering how long you were doing activism before stumbling onto this stream thing and the ways in which they've ended up informing each other. Has there been a synergy? I hate using the word synergy because it's become such corporate speak. Like when you just say the word, it just sounds like you're talking brand talk, but synergy does have a non-brand, origin. Like, so I'm still going to use the word, but has there been like a synergy as one helped the other? And I would just know your thoughts about that, how you came to organizing and how to help each other.
Before I really started to stream, I wasn't so much part of a major organizing activist role. I was doing a lot of volunteer work in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I went to school. And during the time I went to school, I was volunteering at an all-male homeless shelter. And that's really where I began learning more about homelessness on an individual level, where I would go in and I would have conversations with these gentlemen while I would sew their belongings, right? So if they had if they needed a button sewed back on, if they had torn a hole in their jeans, I would help get their garments back up and sewn together while having these really in-depth conversations that kind of helped inform my understanding of what it means to become homeless and how people become homeless. And that really did drive me in my desire to become a champion for those who are experiencing homelessness. And it was very specific. It was a very specific demographic, obviously. Whenever I was volunteering, I was looking to volunteer with the organization that had this branch that was an all-male homeless shelter. They kind of said that we don't have a lot of volunteers who are working in this particular shelter. So I just decided, sure, why not? And from there, I really did learn a great deal about what it means in the plight of homelessness that I kind of carried with me, that does drive a lot of my impassioned speeches that I deliver on Twitch. I also would do a lot of volunteer work with some friends, organizations, food drives, banks, That was always really important to me as well. I didn't really start to get into organizing until I moved to Los Angeles. I started to
Real quick, what brought you to Los Angeles? Did you have any previous experience with Los Angeles, or was that your first time living in Los Angeles, that this move you're talking about?
Interestingly enough, during my last year of graduate school, I was kind of thinking about maybe moving to New York, to be honest, or going back to the East Coast. But I had this class, it was this course, it was a policy course that required an interview. And I got set up with an architect who was based here in Los Angeles. And I talked to her about what she was doing as an architect who was trying to build housing for those experiencing homelessness here in Los Angeles. And from there, she kind of opened up the opportunity for me to really get into what LA was going through and kind of inform my own decisions of whether or not I wanted to move back to Los Angeles or move back to the East Coast or move to Los Angeles, because I realized that there was a serious housing crisis going on from that conversation that I had with this particular architect. And I just kind of thought that I'm closer to Los Angeles than I am the East Coast. And from there, I just kind of, my wheels started to turn that maybe there would be an opportunity to really become part of this organized effort to end homelessness in Los Angeles, even though that's a crazy concept. But if I wanted to be an active member in trying to fight back or combat the housing crisis and homelessness, then Los Angeles would be a great place to go, right? So that kind of like led me to become interested in maybe moving to Los Angeles. And then things just kind of happened really favorably for me. Like, we're talking like, I don't know, almost like divine intervention style, like things that just kind of opportunities for employment started to open up. And it was a very strange, like, it was a very like almost eerie how things came together for me that I was just not anticipating. So I was like, all right, I'm guessing it's going to work out if I move to Los Angeles, even though like the job that I was pretty much given did not necessarily, it wasn't the most high paying job. And I knew that I would have to, honestly, like I realized that, well, the opportunity to move to Los Angeles, get my feet, on the ground was there. And I then would have the opportunity to start organizing. So I started to do that really early on. But I also realized that the job that offered me like employment really early on that didn't require me to do a broad search was not going to be paying all of my bills. So that also led me to maybe consider Twitch streaming, because I was like, I'm going to need supplemental income if I'm going to make it on the mean streets of LA. It's just
Gotcha.
If it's going, but it was a worthwhile thing to just kind of take the job. And even whenever I was experiencing homelessness myself. So under the categories of homelessness, what it means, like how do you define one who is experiencing homelessness? If you do not have a permanent residence, and I was staying in a hotel at that point, I was experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles for the first month and a half. I was here and working. And even whenever I was experiencing homelessness, I started to go to meetings. I started to go to events for heading home was my old gig where I volunteered, but with United Way and everyone in Los Angeles. So even whenever I was living in a hotel, like I started to organize almost immediately when I got here, which was a very fulfilling thing. And it did allow me to feel like, I can find a way to be both, a person who is experiencing homelessness and also like find a way to find my own place and eventually get settled in and establish myself, which eventually everything came together, luckily. So yeah, that's something that I don't really mention, but like whenever I moved to Los Angeles, I was staying in a hotel or motel for a few months.
So that ended up informing a lot of your politics as well, as far as being able to not just see it from the outside, but from the inside as well. I mean, I have to imagine.
I think that if anything, it just kind of gave me the ability to step into the shoes of somebody who has experienced homelessness, not so much chronic homelessness, but the anxiety, the weighing on your own mental health, feeling like there is a sense of helplessness there that you can't necessarily, you as much as you want to be able to fix, if things aren't necessarily working out. And I had to go through a few rounds of like applications for housing because I had not worked long enough in my job for them to be able to take my application, because I didn't have proof of steady income at that point. And so, that was incredibly nerve-wracking, to not know when I would be able to even move in or if I would meet the qualifications. So I guess that's where like I did take a risk with starting a job in Los Angeles without having secure housing. And I definitely felt the anxiety that comes along with those uncertainties that are tied to housing and permanent residency, for sure.
Has your politics changed since you started streaming? Like, or has it the same politics you pretty much came into it with?
I started off streaming as a baby leftist, and I think I am a little bit more radicalized now than I was whenever I started streaming. But if anything, it's just me moving further and further, left in my politics, to be quite honest. But I would like to think that I started the stream back in April of 2019 as a very left-leaning progressive. And I have been pretty honest about, making that shift from leftism from liberalism. And it was a little treacherous, to be honest. Like, I was a little set in my ways for a while, and it took a little longer than I cared to have to admit, to break away from my espoused understanding of politics that were definitely rooted in liberalism, and realizing like, oh my God, I was so wrong about so many things because my conscience and my moral compass aligned with leftist values. And I felt that I was contradicting myself and that I was in this weird state of like disarray, because the more that I realized that I was wrong and the more that I learned about things that I hadn't been aware of, I realized that I looked like a big idiot about a lot of things. And that was coming to terms with how dumb you look whenever you realize that you were wrong by planting your feet firmly in,
Do you ever catch yourself lapsing? Like, you hear a Jon Stewart voice in the background and you just like, Pavlov dog, you start like laughing. Salivating.
Yeah, no, sometimes I do. Yeah.
Hear an Obama speech and then like a tear just starts forming in the corner of your eye.
If anything, I think that, sometimes I will laugh at, a dumb liberal joke, but I like to think that I have enough capacity for introspection that I can see somebody who is behaving or upholding politics rooted in liberalism, and I can definitely identify with the point in time in my life where I was exactly that person. And I will take that opportunity to talk about it in my chat. Like, this is where I was at one point, and if I can make this jump, if I can redivert what I thought was right and understand that there is an opportunity to push further and further left, especially if it will better align with your own moral compass. That's what it really came down to, is that I was lacking significant information about how capitalism and political decisions were harming incredibly vulnerable communities that I had not had a lot of exposure to. So, that was me coming to terms with my own white privilege, with my own, my own bubble that I kind of grew up around. Being from West Virginia, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to other groups, other groups or other communities that made me very ignorant in my understanding about how the world works and who is impacted or excluded or hurt or marginalized or oppressed from these very oppressive systems, right? And so, yeah, I think that really had a lot to do with the reason why I eventually started to move further and further left in my politics, my ideological perspectives.
I like this joke by Aniva Mario. Amy is now a key player in the girl boss to comrade pipeline. Yeah, that's definitely one of your followers. Your followers are so funny. They make me laugh a lot. But
yeah,
I forgot.
They're pretty good.
Forgot to do the house cleaning. I was supposed to do this. I was too excited to talk to Amy. Yeah, but by all means, if you enjoy the services we provide, the information we provide, feel free to hit up the super chat, or if you're on YouTube, or become a subscriber either on YouTube or Twitch. There's simulcast on both, but feel free to do that. And on the bottom, you see the Venmo or Cash App for Champagne Sharks, or the PayPal, or become a patron. All that goes to reinvesting in the show, because I want a new camera. So it'll help the stream look better. So yeah, and of course, check out twitch.tv/AmyeC3 if you want to follow Amy and see what Amy's about. If you want to hear her talk more about housing and bash landlords. But I want to actually, before we wrap up, I want you to take a time to just talk about what your stream is like, and what your usual day of streaming is like for you, for someone who wants to know why they should tune into your channel. Like, what are they going to see? And also, I'm curious, what, if any, political media do you now consume as a baby leftist? And in your case, I figure it must be hard because you stream a lot. So I imagine you probably don't even want to consume media when you're
Right.
not doing it. I know it's happened to me. I actually listen to less podcasts and watch less YouTube after I've started doing it. I've actually watched and listened to less instead of more. So I'm so both those questions. What's your stream like on an average day, and what leftist media or political media in general do you find yourself consuming when you want to stay abreast of things?
Okay, great questions. So it really depends on what's going on. We will typically cover news, what's happening in everyday life. We will look at housing news, depending on what is going on. I also do YouTube videos. I've done 3 YouTube videos thus far. One of my resolutions is to get better at making consistent YouTube videos. And one of the things I like to do is engage with my community and ask my community to help participate in our organizing efforts or our YouTube video compilation. So I'll ask them to help with putting together or finding imagery to go along with my long format YouTube scripts that will turn into videos. We've also done a lot of organizing as a community. We put together an information campaign to notify as many tenants as possible that the CDC had issued a moratorium on eviction. We put together a list of volunteers. We printed out flyers. We asked individuals to go and put these flyers out in their community, because we realized that there was a real disconnect in the information that was being put out by, representatives in political office, of mainstream media, and that a lot of tenants didn't even know that they had federal level protections in place. So that was a really fun and meaningful community-based activity that we put together for a few days. And that's some of the content that you will see on my stream. We do try to organize. We do try to use our time to reflect on what is happening, not only on a global scale when it comes to the news and everyday events, but really dig into what's happening in housing. And there has been a lot of news surrounding houseless activists who are occupying homes right now. So I don't know if I covered the Tacoma, Washington, but we kept a close eye on what was happening in El Sereno, California with the Reclaim Our Homes movements. We talked about what was happening in Philadelphia. And now we're kind of delving into a new kind of project where we're putting together data schematics and data visualization to paint the picture of some of these issues tied to our housing crisis, the looming eviction crisis. So one of the last projects that we did was taking data from the Aspen Institute, who had projected eviction data before the CDC moratorium on evictions was put into place, but it was broken down at a state level, and we really did tie the eviction crisis to data visualization, and that was a really fun and rewarding stream that we had just done a few days ago. So to be honest, there's a mixed bag of what you will experience on my channel. It just depends on what's happening. What are we organizing for? Am I working on a YouTube script? Are we in the middle of a huge news story related to houseless activists? It really is a variety channel, if I'm being completely honest, and I like that.
And two questions. The question on the screen from Kamaria about if you've worked with LA tenants unions, and if so, could you shout them out? And somebody in the chat put you on blast for having a hula hoop peeking out in the background. Do you hula hoop on the stream too, or is that just not in the stream?
All right. So I have done some work with the LA Tenants Union. I really do need to get back in there and become pay my dues. But they are really at the forefront of eviction defense. They are putting together and organizing calls to help other tenant unions across the country. They are really spearheading this movement in so many ways, and they are working tirelessly to do as much as they can for those who are at the brink of eviction in Los Angeles. So I will give a shout out to all of the wonderful volunteers and workers in LA Tenants Union who are going out and being a part of this movement and getting people to show up at tenant strikes and putting bodies in front of sheriffs who are trying to do illegal evictions right now. It's incredibly important to highlight the work that LA Tenants Union is doing. And if you can if you can become a member of the LA Tenants Union, if you're in the area, or if you are looking to join a tenant union in your own area, do see if one is available. If not, there's always an opportunity to create one. So that is something that I would like to leave off with as well. Oh, Streetwatch LA is absolutely wonderful as well. That's a subcommittee as part of DSA, and they do a lot of great work to keep those who are experiencing homelessness safe. So basically what Streetwatch does is it has volunteers who will go and protect houseless individuals or homeless encampments and report any wrongdoing of the police that are trying to illegally sweep an encampment. You have to notify the public whenever a sweep is about to occur. This should give time for those who are experiencing homelessness to pack up and be able to move safely without being disrupted by the police or experience any kind of violence thwarted toward them. And so that's really what Streetwatch does as well. And they are a really great organization that protects our houseless comrades in LA. So thank you for bringing that up, OG.
At the very least, you have one Kamaria over, if not anyone else. Kamaria says definitely gonna check out your streams. Never answered about the hula hoop.
Okay, so I do. Okay, fine. So sometimes I will offer financial incentives. So you're familiar with Twitch. You've done a hype train, I'm sure.
Oh no, not yet. I'm really bad with Twitch. I'm in fact, one of the things I gotta do is pick your brain about, because I don't understand all the features, but I don't know what a hype train is.
All right, so a hype train is whenever you have some sort of triggering event. I mean, you might have your I think it depends on what setting you have. If you have a really high setting, then it might be difficult to trigger a hype train. So I have a really low setting, so it's really easy to trigger the hype train. It's 3 events, subs, bits from 3 different viewers that triggers a hype train. So basically it is a built-in function to try to get as many subs and as many bits as possible. And it's kind of like an incentive program for like viewers to contribute to the streamer's hype train by like getting them to donate bits or to sub or to gift subs. And sometimes I will offer 30 seconds of hula hoop in exchange for a completion of the hype train, because I do fall victim of the worst parts of online.
That you got capitalism. To. No, I get it. I got you. Don't blame me. It was in the chat. It was thrown out there because people are complaining of a hula hoop debt. So I had to.
Yeah, the hula hoop debt. Whenever I'm like, all right, I'll do hula, and then I don't, and then like you always hula hoop. Debt. You're in debt with us. So that's what that means.
So last thing, what, if any, political media are you consuming to stay abreast? Like right now, I know there's a whole Jimmy Dore thing, and I do not understand it at all. Like I have a very vague understanding, and I ask because I'm trying to figure out what I want to start using to politically educate myself or stay abreast, because I have such little free time to consume much.
I really do rely heavily on the great gospel of Amy Goodman in Democracy Now. That's where I just get a snapshot of what is happening both domestically and internationally. And I'll also just kind of, as weird as this sounds, like Twitter timeline does do marvels. Well, you have to
It
make sure
does.
that you're following, some. I follow like the Intercept. I follow investigative journalists that work for the Intercept, a Jacobin. I follow those Twitter handles as well. So I would say that those are some of the major news outlets that I rely on heavily that I get from my Twitter feed.
Okay, great. So before you go, any last things you want to plug, or just anything, you have a burning desire to talk about, but you weren't asked? Is your chance to get the last word before we go. And thanks again for joining us. It's long overdue. I should have had you on long
Yeah.
before.
No, thank you so much for having me. I think that if I'm going to end on a note, it's just to let everyone know that what we are experiencing right now in the United States is a housing crisis that predates COVID-19, that we had a housing crisis well before COVID-19 exacerbated it. So now is the time to organize with the local tenant union, to unionize your own building if you feel so inclined, and really look at the material that is available online, or come check out my channel to understand what you can do as a renter or a tenant to help protect yourself, to empower yourself and your community. We really do focus on the tools and the resources that will help you if you are a tenant or looking to organize in your community. That's incredibly important to find a way to give back and to become a leader, because we need more leadership at the local level. That is how we spearhead organizations. That's how we spearhead coalition building. And your participation in your community makes all of the difference right now. So I just wanted to let you know that there is an opportunity to give back and to really lean in and better understand the housing crisis that is tied to our economic crisis right now. And please check me out. I also have a YouTube account that only has 3 videos. But if you want to look at what we're working with right now, it's also AmyeC3. You can find me there, and follow me on Twitch and Twitter. Same handle names, AmyeC3. We would
And let
love
me
to.
let
We
me
would love
put
to have you.
let me let people see how AmyeC3 is spelled, so you can search for her.
Thank
This
you.
is the Twitch address, but you can also search for her on YouTube with AmyeC3. And yes, and as far as, I'm just going to end it with my own plugs of saying, you already know all the ways to donate to us. The scrolling on the bottom, Venmo or Cash App, PayPal. But the other thing is, whether you can donate to the show or not, the other important thing you can do, and it's as important, it's super important, so is just comment, like, share, subscribe. If you like what we do, follow us on Twitch, follow us on YouTube, share videos with people, because we're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers in 2021. That's become our arbitrary goal, is to have 10,000 streaming subscribers combined between Twitch and YouTube. So yeah, no times are tough. I know, not everyone could donate, but subscribing just takes an easy click. So by all means, feel free to subscribe. That's always appreciated as well. Thank you, Amy. Always a good time. You're always welcome to come back on. And
Thank you so much for having me. It's a
yeah.
great conversation. We'll
Oh,
have
for
to do it
sure.
again soon.
Oh, something else I want to ask you too. Do you have a resource page? Because I know you always know a lot of good books and studies and stuff, and I always think I'd like to read books or studies that you do. I was wondering if you had any place where you have like a reading list, anything written.
I don't know if we have a resource page in the Discord, but that's a really good idea. I know that we have put together some lists that are commands in the Twitch channel, but in terms of a place where I can direct you to get a whole library of resources is something that I don't think that I have, but that's a really good idea. I should talk to my mods about setting up some sort of repository.
Yeah, because I can't take credit for the idea. Some fans of Champagne Sharks have compiled every book that we've ever mentioned on the show and made a reading list. And when they did that, I was like, oh, this is a good idea that I can't take credit for. But now I always look for it with other people I like. When there's people who's like knowledge base I always tend to look. For example, like Andre's project, Resistance Noir, has a really good reading list.
I
Yes.
believe that.
Yeah, so if you ever do set one up, please let me know and I'll plug it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for out there for joining us as well. Appreciate it. And everyone have a good night.
Thanks
Enjoy
so
your
much.
weekend.
You too.